Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm 𝐅𝐨𝐥𝐿𝐤𝐭, Research Analyst at Verité Research, and I'm honored to be your host for today's discussion, From Compliance to Competitiveness, Securing Sri Lanka's Place in the Global Market. This event is organized by Verité Research together with the Delegation of the European Union to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. We are delighted to have with us leaders from the government, the private sector, international organizations, and academia. Your presence highlights just how important this conversation is, how Sri Lanka can transform compliance with international sustainability standards into a real source of competitive advantage. Before we begin, just a quick housekeeping note. Kindly keep your smartphones on silent, and throughout the program, you can send in your questions at any time. Simply scan the QR code on screen or go to slido.com and enter the code 1665149. To commence the proceedings of this evening's program, we are privileged to have Mr. 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐤𝐿𝐤𝐿, Secretary to the Ministry of Trade, Commerce, Food Security and Cooperative Development, who will give his guest remarks. Mr. 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐤𝐿𝐤 is an attorney at law and a senior officer of the Sri Lanka Administrative Office with over 25 years of experience in the public sector. He holds a special degree in economics from the University of Jaffna and MPhil in economics from the University of 𝐅𝐨𝐥𝐥𝐨𝐰, an MBA from the University of Muratoa and Bachelor of Laws from the Open University of Sri Lanka. He has also completed postgraduate studies in development policy, international relations, and human resource management. Over the course of his career, he has served in several key positions, including Director General of Trade and Investment Policy and Fiscal Policy, Minister Counselor at the Sri Lankan Embassy in China, and Chief Information Officer at the Ministry of Public Administration. He has also contributed as a board member of major state-owned enterprises, including People's Bank and the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka. Please join me in welcoming Mr. 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐤𝐿𝐤 to deliver his remarks.
Honorable Officer and Leader, Your Excellency Ambassador Moreno, Member of Parliament, distinguished representative from Verité Research, Delegation of the European Union, esteemed ambassadors, high commissioners, leaders, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Firstly, I thank the organizer for convening this timely and critical dialogue in Sri Lankan context. The subject before us is transforming compliance into a competitive advantage. Basically, this is not the learning process, but it's a Sri Lanka's more national economic strategy. My purpose this evening is to outline the policy perspective on the global trading environment, the national imperatives that drive our policies today. With a specific strategic choice we are making to secure Sri Lanka's place in the global market. When we look at the subject today events, there are two concepts the forum is going to discuss. One is compliance. What is compliance? Compliance simply refers to the act of adhering to laws, regulations, standards, or policies imposed by government, international organization, regulatory bodies, trade agreement, and today even trading partners. It involves following established procedure and ensuring that activities, products, services, the system meet specified requirements of the citizens or the consumers globally. And non-compliance to these results in penalties, restricted market access. I think that is the concern for us. And legal consequences, and as we are discussing today, the trade competitiveness in the global market. However, we should be mindful the compliance, the nature of the compliant requirement, whether it is a facilitative, whether it is prohibitive or below the standards. Of course, we need to go with the facilitative, but we don't need to waste our time or money, resources in complying to the prohibitive or below standard requirements. The second term we are talking about, the competitiveness. So competitiveness, I think we know that from all trade theories from Ricardo to Maldives today, we are talking about. But in general sense, what we are thinking competitiveness today's context, the ability of a firm or an industry or a country to produce goods and services that meet the test of international standards while maintaining or increasing real income of the people over time. In a way, we say we try to comply while protecting our national interest. National interest will cover all aspects of the country. And it reflects how effectively and efficiently an economy transforms the inputs into outputs. So where today that all panelists will come out, how we are focusing this transformation process. Inputs are there, outputs are needed, how to transform. So in this context, now as I mentioned to you, theoretically we can learn from Ricardo to Maldives. Ricardo talk about the national or the country level competitiveness. Again, Paul Krugman, who are advocating for the new trade theories, advocated for industry level competitiveness. And finally, under the new trade theory, we are talking about the firm level competitiveness. So today, even a country may not be competitive, but firm can be competitive. And the resource being reallocated to those agencies. So in this context, I think there are three dimensions we need to understand. One is the global dimension. The one is our national dimension. Third one, how we are working on. So today, the trading environment has fundamentally get altered. So where the post-war consensus towards a rule-based trading system transform into some sort of a regionalized or towards a protectionist, or some people call it as minilateralism perspective, where we are losing the rule-based systems to a protective nature. So the global landscape, the trading landscape is currently undergoing a period of significant transition. The established rules-based system faces new pressures and face global economic growth, present challenges for exporting nations. In this context, it is essential for Sri Lanka to navigate the evolving environment with a foresight, seeking out new opportunities to build a sustainable competitive advantage. Sri Lanka must therefore adopt a strategic and mature path. Our future prosperity will be built on genuine, durable competitiveness, not on the temporary walls, including the protective walls. The geopolitical shifts are not only the factors impacting the global trade. There is also significant growing focus on the climate change. This presents a dual challenge for Sri Lanka. At home, we confront the direct consequences of climate change we are experiencing throughout the year. Concurrently, our exporters are facing rising expectations to adopt more sustainable and environmentally conscious production methods. Meeting these increasingly stringent sustainability standards is therefore becoming critical determinant for market access, especially the developed markets. Therefore, the global context bring into our second point where the Sri Lanka's national imperatives are taking place. We all know Sri Lanka is emerged from an unprecedented crisis in 2022. Now we are in the stabilization and getting momentum for growth orientation. To ensure this recovery is sustainable, it is essential to accelerate growth with increased trade and investment playing a central role, because we are biggest Sri Lankan import dependent export economy. Increasing our export earnings, export oriented investments is a fundamental necessity for rebuilding foreign exchange reserves, ensuring fiscal discipline, creating a resilient economy. While trade policy can be used as a job promoting mechanism, but we are in the administration recognize its actual impact in a complex and not guaranteed. Our focus, therefore, it is difficult, not on the difficult, it's on difficult path, but fundamental reform required to create a genuine and lasting export sustainable capacity. Core mandate of the Ministry of Trade is to create a real world condition for our export sector to thrive based on the clear assessment of our challenges and our unique opportunities. In this context, today the competition is increasing. Sri Lanka needs finds its own place in the global market, finds a ways to make the country an attractive sourcing and investment destination. Sri Lanka cannot compete on the scale of land, labor or domestic market size with our giant neighbors. A strategy based solely on being cheapest option is neither viable or desirable. Therefore, our path is to competitive, require more sophisticated direction to being partner of the existing world. Therefore, today's event is exceptionally timely as it invites us to explore new and promising direction for building our national competitive advantage. For many years, the conversation around stringent, green and sustainable standard has been framed by challenges. We must acknowledge that these standards can be viewed as a burden, creating new hurdles for market access. Complying with them, investment in new technologies, process and certification, and these are costs. We call it as a trade cost. But these costs can be particularly challenging for a country like Sri Lanka, which has more than 80% SMEs, which are backbone of our economy. In this context, the state, the government need to play a role to bring this competitiveness or the compliance infrastructure and the facilitation to be done. Yet we have reached a point where meeting this global requirement is no longer choice for Sri Lanka, but a fundamental necessity for any firm which is expecting to secure or expand its place in the international market. The critical questions before us, which is this forum is rightly addressing today, is how we can collectively move from face these challenges and transform it into our powerful strategic opportunity for Sri Lanka. Higher level of compliance with the standard can help differentiate Sri Lanka and its product from others. There are precisely the kinds of forward-thinking discussion the government wishes to encourage and also support. The effective and resilient national export strategy cannot be formulated in isolation. It must be shaped through robust debate and a sustained collaborative dialogues between the state and our innovative private sector and our research institutions and the universities. Furthermore, we must recognize that the focus on green and sustainable industries extend far beyond securing market access. The transition to more sustainable practices is inherently beneficial to our own nation. Promoting those sectors strengthen our domestic economy, enhance the health and well-being of our citizens, and help preserve a unique natural heritage and biodiversity of Sri Lanka for generations to come. Therefore, on behalf of the Ministry of Trade, Commerce, Food Security and Corporate Development, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the organizers. I look forward to listening from the distinguished experts here today and learning from their valuable insight and experience as we work together to chart this important path forward. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Verité Research, for those insightful remarks. We now have the distinct honor of hearing from Her Excellency Carmen Moreno, European Union Ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Her Excellency Carmen Moreno is a senior Spanish diplomat with over 30 years of experience in international relations, development cooperation, and peace building. She has served extensively across Asia, including postings in India, China, Pakistan, and Malaysia, and held the position of Director General for Development Cooperation with Asia. Her work has consistently bridged sustainable development with trade and investment promotion, support to economic reforms, and regional integration. Currently, she serves as the European Union Ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, following previous ambassadorial roles for the EU in Cambodia and for Spain and Thailand. She holds a law degree and postgraduate qualifications in conflict resolution and international relations in Asia. It is now my privilege to invite you to the stage Her Excellency Carmen Moreno to share her remarks.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, dear MPs, Excellencies, dear friends, and distinguished panelists. Thank you all for being here with us today. This event came about when we were thinking how we can support a bit of Sri Lanka looking not only to their own reality, but also what is happening outside the country. And we chose this name, the Compliance to Competitiveness, to bring about the European Union strategy on competitiveness that has been approved this year. It's called the Competitiveness Compass. And why is this important? Because this strategy we have approved is the result of a long process of reflection on what do we, the European Union, the Member States, need to do to remain competitive in a rapidly changing global market. It's a question that is very urgent and that all of us, European Union, Sri Lanka, everybody, has to ask themselves how we can succeed in this new marketplace that is changing faster than we could have ever imagined. The marketplace is indeed changing, and with it, the familiar dynamics of globalization that we know and we are comfortable with. For a long time, globalization has been powered by compliance, efficiency, and cost. It's been driven by markets hungry for consumption, and the companies started moving the production abroad, localizing themselves in other countries where labor costs were cheaper, or more efficient, or younger labor force, with better access to raw materials, better connectivity, or strategic locations. So we jointly invented the infinite value chain, in which products were, the production of a single unit was spread across many countries, assembled in another, packaged in another, and then final destination. And this infinite chain was driven also by something that we have become too used to and we take for granted, which is an open and secure sea lanes of communication. So in this process, compliance was key to success. Compliance with WTO rules, compliance with technical standards that open the doors to high-value markets, compliance with the requirements of investors, compliance with the standards that make possible to put together big volume and be transported by sea. Compliance was necessary, but also compliance was perceived, as the Secretary has pointed out, as a burden for the state and for the producers or the industry, an obligation. But for many countries, the truth is that this has been a very successful formula, and it's provided growth and it's provided jobs in many countries. It has worked very well. The countries that have harnessed globalization opened themselves to trade and to foreign investment. They gain by that capital, technology, equipment, skills. They inserted themselves into global value chains, and they achieved rapid industrial expansion. So growth and jobs in those countries came directly from exports, was built on cost competitiveness, and supported by investment in infrastructure and trade agreements that opened to profitable markets. So the result of this has exceeded expectations. China, of course, is the most striking example, but you can also find many countries that have succeeded in globalization, in Asia, especially in ASEAN, and in Eastern Europe. They follow this model of development and have climbed steadily in the value chain, and now compete in high-tech industries. They have built a strong service economy, and they have evolved from receiving investments to being investors themselves in their countries. Other countries, like Sri Lanka, have benefited only partially from the era of global growth, and they never fully industrialized. During this panel, I'm sure you will be able to hear more on the reasons why this happened and what is the position now of Sri Lanka. But now these countries, like Sri Lanka, they face a new dilemma. The oil manufacturing escalator, the model I have just described and we are familiar with, which has lifted many others, may no longer work. So let me return to the competitiveness strategy of the European Union, because there we analyze three megatrends. We selected three megatrends that are transforming globalization and could define how the global trade system could itself in the coming years. Understanding these megatrends, looking outside, not only inside, harnessing them, will be essential to be competitive. So the first megatrend we identify is very clear to all of us, is geopolitical competition. Conflicts and rivalries are already disrupting trade. Dependencies are being weaponized. Tariffs, export controls, sanctions are no longer trade tools. They are the geopolitical tools of choice. So efficiency, as the main driver of globalization, has been replaced by security. This is the main concern of most governments, especially our concern in the European Union. So value chains we are going to see reshoring of some critical value chains. We are going to see friendly shoring. So this talks to country compliance. So they will be choosing trusted partners to create new value chains. And proximity will be also a factor to take into account. In this proximity thinking, you will see that regional integration is becoming essential for national security. It's becoming essential for trade and for economic security. In Europe, I have to say we have a very good example of integration, of regional integration, but still we are working on it. Right now, the total volume of trade of the European Union is 6.5 trillion of US dollar a year in export of goods and 6.5 trillion of dollars a year on services, export and services. 65% of this volume is traded among ourselves within the single market, not external. So now in these competitiveness strategies, we are looking into how we are going to remove existing barriers and non-tariff barriers within the single market to increase this percentage. Again, friendly shoring means as first. So ASEAN is also increasing their internal trade. Intra-ASEAN trade has grown up till 22%. So to expand these efforts, like I say, we are doing a regulatory review, but there are also, we see emerging parallel connectivities, different connectivities, that try to escape choke points and weaponization of these choke points. We are seeing the Central Corridor that is being developed by China, but we have come also on board of this in Central Asia. The Middle Corridor is called, to avoid going through Russia towards Europe. So now Turkey will become the hub of this Middle Corridor that the Chinese call it. And we have come also on board with a global gateway for grid connectivity. So we see also the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, working with the Gulf countries to build connectivity between India and therefore South Asia region and Europe. How we connect these connectivities will be the next challenge. So the second megatrend that we talk about in our strategy is, of course, climate change and the urgent need for a green and circular economy, to decarbonize our economies, to shift to clean energy. And this will also increase our strategic autonomy by reducing dependencies of imported fuels. We are not producing fossil fuels. So this change, this shift, will also reshape the demand, and we are one of the main markets. So this is something that an exporter country should be looking into. Major markets will care less about the cost, about the fast consumption, and will care more about responsible consumption. And in this green transition, access to critical raw materials will be essential. So trade and investment policy will very much be directed there and not to consumption. The other mega trend, and to make it a bit shorter, is the fourth industrial revolution, led by artificial intelligence. And this will also demand new infrastructure, new raw materials, investment in research, investment in new skills, and clean, affordable, and reliable energy supply is essential for this fourth revolution to take place. So we need clean energy. So what is the meaning of these megatrends for globalization? It means that the old competitive advantages, low cost, cheap labor, speed in mass production, efficiency, compliance with the standards, may no longer be enough. Mass industrialization may not be the solution for newcomers to globalization. The old model of globalization, the escalator, may not work anymore, or may only work in some places. Why is this not enough? Well, I want to refer to compliance, especially because it's the title of our panel. Standards are going to be there, but we have said before, we are observing in geopolitics a fragmentation of trade. I haven't entered into the fragmentation of the financial system, which is a big risk we have on our hands as well, but this may lead to different standards for different clients. So how can countries adapt to that? It's going to be a big challenge, especially for countries, small countries like Sri Lanka. So, today in the panel we are going to hear from industries in Sri Lanka, from players that are already prepared to face this. And they are prepared to seize the opportunities. They have leverage for investment in the rubber sector, in the apparel sector. They have acquired technology skills. They benefited from access to high-value markets, duty-free access to the European Union, and they have taken advantage of the geostrategic location of Sri Lanka, the low shipping cost, and they have already a competitive edge. They are competitive. They have embraced compliance, and they have transformed it into a competitive advantage. But let us be clear. The private sector cannot navigate the coming context alone. Not in Sri Lanka, not anywhere. Public action, the action of the government, the action of the state, will be essential. A fully competitive industry, a fully competitive company will not be able to thrive if it's located in a non-competitive country. Trade relations are among countries, not country with companies, it's with countries. And as I mentioned before, trusted partners will be compliant partners. So there's a big role for the government and for the state to play in this context. Governments are the ones who have to assess the context. They have to identify the strengths of the country, the challenges and the opportunities. They have to set the strategic direction through the right policies. Governments are the ones that have to secure access to markets through trade agreements. They are the ones that have to create the conditions to attract investment into the country, build infrastructure for the green and digital transitions, invest in human capital, and develop connectivity. So we are going to see how foreign, industrial, economic, and trade policy have to work together towards the same goal. Secure capital, secure investments for development and growth. The shift from compliance to competitiveness has to be a national political choice. It requires public and private sector moving together. Only then it can translate into resilience and prosperity and real opportunities for everyone. So with these reflections, that put maybe the global context in the perspective of what we are going to be discussing today, I leave you with the panel. I want to thank Verité for organizing this, and of course 𝐅𝐨𝐥𝐥𝐵 for giving us the space, and all of you for being here. Please feel free to ask whatever you want. The panelists are ready to interact and reply, and I hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for those thoughtful remarks. To ground our discussion with evidence and analysis, we now have a context-setting presentation by Ms. Verité Research, Research Analyst at Verité Research International Economics Program. Her presentation will show why proactive compliance is not just a regulatory requirement, but also a powerful driver of competitiveness and investment. Ms. Verité Research, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. So today, in my presentation, I'll be mainly talking about three main points. The first one is, what is this great green shift and what's driving it? And secondly, that Sri Lanka should establish compliance as a unique selling point. And thirdly, why should Sri Lanka do this now? So, before starting, let me start with this. When you go to a store, what makes you choose one brand over the other? Normally, it's price, quality, convenience. But now, there's an additional factor, sustainability. What's driving this great green shift? Firstly, consumers are. Climate change is real, and consumers have been feeling this. A global survey done by PwC in 2024 showed that 85% of the consumers firsthand experience the negative impacts of climate change. And 80% of these consumers are willing to pay more just to buy sustainably produced goods. Some consumers are even willing to pay a premium of almost 10% on average for goods that are produced sustainably. But it's not just consumers. We also have companies. Companies, if they do not comply with these sustainable requirements, face reputational risks. A global survey done by Nielsen IQ showed that 77% of global consumers will not buy products from companies or brands that have been guilty of greenwashing. So let me give you a few examples. The first one is UK retailer company called Boohoo. It was disclosed that this company's employees were paid less than £3.50 per hour, which is less than the minimum wage, sparked outrage. The company lost nearly 1.5 billion in just 2 days. And then we have the labor abuse expose on Shein by Channel 4, which showed that these workers were working for less than cents for 18 hours and 7 days a week, sparking international outrage and an international boycott of the brand. Not just reputational risks, another factor is also driving this great green shift, climate litigation. Until 2014, we had less than 100 cases filed per year. But since 2015 to 2018, this rose to nearly 200 cases filed per year. And since 2019, we've been seeing a significant increase. They've received more than 200 cases per year and sometimes even 300 cases. Globally, as of July 2025, the total number of cases filed exceed 3,000. Around 20% of these cases that have been filed are targeted towards companies, their directors and officers. And since 2015, more than 250 cases have been filed against companies. For example, we can take Adidas. Court ordered Adidas to stop using climate neutral by 2050, which was their slogan, because they didn't have any concrete steps on how they are going to achieve this beyond 2030. So it's clear, if you're making a sustainability claim, you need to back it up with concrete steps. If you're not, the courts will hold you accountable. And then we have mandatory sustainability reporting requirements on the rise. If we just take the European Union, we have multiple regulations requiring sustainable compliance. We have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, we have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, we have the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and the EU Deforestation Regulation. If we just take the CSRD mandates sustainability reporting on ESG requirements for more than 50,000 companies, including thousands headquartered outside of EU. And another survey that was done with a sample size of 65 countries showed that 58% of the countries have already enacted these disclosure mandates from 2002 to 2020. Some of them did it at once, and some of them phased it out phase by phase. And companies, in response to this, in anticipation of the increasing mandatory sustainability reporting, they have taken a voluntary step. Because the earlier you are compliant, you have a competitive advantage over the companies that are not compliant. A study by KPMG in 2024 showed that 250 of the world's largest companies are mostly compliant with these requirements as of now. So, it's clear, sustainability is a major force in the global economy as of now. And we're saying we should establish sustainable compliance as a unique selling point for Sri Lanka. But let's consider Sri Lanka's position as of now. For any production to happen, we need 4 resources: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. But if we look at Sri Lanka's land situation, this is in comparison to giants like China and India, and even relatively smaller countries in comparison to China and India, Sri Lanka can't compete. It's the same situation when it comes to labor force and the market size. But there are smaller countries with lesser labor and lesser land mass who are in the top 20 exporters of the world, amounting to 70% of the exports. They have found a key point that they've based their comparative advantage on. So companies like Netherlands, Hong Kong, and Singapore have based their competitive advantage on location and connectivity. Countries like Switzerland have based their competitive advantage on innovation and luxury branding, and Taiwan on science and technology. So what is Sri Lanka going to base their competitive advantage on? We are saying sustainable compliance. We have multiple other smaller countries who have already done this. For example, Mauritius established an industry brand for textiles and apparels. They adopted a sustainable supply chain model where manufacturers have to specifically comply with stringent international standards. So much so, if it's made in Mauritius, it's implied that it's ethically and sustainably made. And what's the result? They are a preferred supplier to many global brands like Calvin Klein and Armani. Again, we have Costa Rica, who have established a country brand. In 2013, they launched Essential Costa Rica. If a company wants to use this country brand, they have to pass a sustainability audit in order to use this Essential Costa Rica brand. And this country brand is backed by policy. We have 99% renewable energy. They have a national decarbonization plan. And they're globally recognized. The United Nations organization awarded them the Champions of the Earth Award. And they have, as a result, attracted more than 450 multinationals into their economy. Sri Lanka can also do this, and we have a strong basis to do this on. As a result of being compliant to the 27 international conventions on labor rights, human rights, environment, and the good governance, we have already done to receive the EU GSP Plus facility, we have a strong basis. Rather than just using it as a tool for market access, we can use this as a basis to build our country brand. And we also have an upper hand when it comes to renewable energy. We have a leading position in renewable energy as a percentage of the total electricity output, even in comparison to giant countries like India, China, and Thailand. So we have a strong basis. And we have done this before, granted on an industry scale or rather small scale, but we have done this before. The Garments Without Guilt initiative in 2006, when we faced cutthroat competition and low-cost products in the market, Sri Lanka focused on strict labor and environmental requirements. By 2015, more than 80% of the garments in Sri Lanka were compliant with these standards. And we managed to attract brands like Victoria's Secret, Gap, Nike, Tommy Hilfiger. We've established a strong brand identity in the textiles and apparel sector. And we also have private sector involvement. We have companies like Brandix, who have established the world's first net zero carbon manufacturing plant. And we also have companies like MAS Holdings, where they invest in solar parks, biodiversity, women empowerment, and have received international awards for being ethically and sustainably compliant. So, what we are saying is, it's clear that we have a strong basis. We should build on this now and establish a country brand, a unique selling point as a sustainable and ethical manufacturing destination. But we have a few challenges. If we see the European Union deforestation regulation, we have to act now because sustainable compliance is no longer optional. It's mandatory. A study done by Institute of Policy Studies this year showed that if we fail to comply with the requirements of EUDR, we would lose access to the entire EU market, which would contract our GDP by 0.07% and result in a reduction of labor demand in the rubber industry by 15.6%. So it's clear we can't consider compliance as optional, but we can use compliance as a tool for market access, not just in the European Union, but find other global communities where also we can send our products into. And also, just like we told before, smaller countries like Costa Rica and Mauritius have already done this. But bigger countries who already have a competitive advantage in other factors are already identifying this opportunity and they're moving in. Most of these countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia either have a law, policy, regulations, or in the process of implementing them after draft stage. So we're saying we should be proactive now. If we take an example, eco-industrial parks is an important factor in sustainability. From being less than 50 eco-industrial parks by 2000, now we have more than 250 eco-industrial parks in the world. But Sri Lanka does not have any functioning EIP, as opposed to regional countries like Vietnam, who have joined with the UNIDO and developed technical guidelines on how to convert their existing industrial parks into eco-industrial parks. So they've identified this opportunity and are moving on it to transform 50% of their industrial parks into eco-industrial parks by 2050. So essentially, what we're saying is, when the world is being proactive, if we remain just reactive, we might just be left behind again. But if we act now, if we are proactive now, we can establish our country brand, we can establish a unique selling point for Sri Lanka as an ethical and sustainable manufacturing destination and attract the trust of global brands. So for this time, we should actually be proactive and for once be ahead of the curve. Thank you. That's a bit for my presentation. And we have an esteemed panel here who will discuss this in depth and in relevance to each of the sectors.
Thank you, Ms. Veerabhadra, for providing that data-driven foundation for today's conversation. We now turn to the centerpiece of this evening, our panel discussion from compliance to competitiveness. This discussion will be moderated by Dr. Ganeshan Vignaraja, Senior Fellow at ODI in London. Dr. Vignaraja is a distinguished economist with more than 30 years of experience, having advised governments and international organizations across Asia on trade, competitiveness, and industrial policy. He has previously served in senior roles at the Asian Development Bank Institute and holds a doctorate in economics from the University of Oxford. Joining him on this panel are Dr. Dayaratna Silva, the Executive Director of Pathfinder Foundation, a veteran international trade economist. He has represented Sri Lanka at the WTO in Geneva, held senior roles at the United Nations, and served in the Department of Commerce. Ms. 𝐅𝐨𝐥𝐥𝐨𝐰, Director General of the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, with more than 3 decades of experience, she has led international investment missions and plays a central role in shaping Sri Lanka's investment climate. Mr. K.A.C. Vidyarathna, President of the Plastics and the Rubber Institute of Sri Lanka, a seasoned entrepreneur and an industry leader. He has been pivotal in advancing Sri Lanka's polymer and rubber sector globally and in preparing industries for emerging international sustainability regulations. Mr. Felix Fernando, CEO and Managing Director of Omega Line Limited, one of Sri Lanka's largest apparel exporters. With over 35 years of experience in manufacturing, he has been instrumental in building Sri Lanka's apparel industry into a competitive global player and also serves as the Deputy Chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum. And lastly, we have Mr. Nipuna Gunaratna, Sustainable Product and Circularity Lead at Mars Holdings. With a decade of cross-functional experience, he now leads sustainability and circularity initiatives across Mars, embedding future-ready practices in one of Sri Lanka's largest apparel groups. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming our moderator and panelists to the stage.
Great. So there you have it. You have this very interesting scene setting that we've had from these 3 wonderful presentations. The first point is we're in a new era, right? We've gone from globalization, which is the integration of markets and countries and firms through supply chain activity globally, to something that people are saying is geoeconomics, with the weaponization of trade and shifting supply chains, which are changing in a way that we may not have seen. Second, you have countries and players, the European Union for instance, which have taken on much more proactive approaches, as Carmen said, to dealing with this phenomenon. I think the EU Compass is something worth reading, and I hope we take note of those 3 megatrends which are really changing the way we think of globalization, right? And by the way, this is also happening in developing countries. India, for instance, has taken a lot of effort recently to deal with this issue of 50% tariffs, which they're now facing, which is at one level an impossible situation, at the other level is a call to activity for India to change its structure of its economy much more towards a regional market, which it's trying to do. So that's very clear. So in this new era that we are, the question is this niche area of green a manufacturing success base for the future for, say, a country like Sri Lanka? So that's the big kind of question we're trying to take. And the subsidiary question is, what does it take Sri Lankan firms to get into this area, and what does it cost? And the third point is, what does the state have to do to support this, right? So it's very simple in that sense what we're trying to do. So the way I want to try to conduct this fantastic panel is to really start with a kind of an opening question to everybody. And I hope we can give a couple of minutes of response. And then we're going to probably then talk a bit more detail in what companies are doing to adapt to all of this. And then I'm going to open it up to the floor if you all have questions to ask at that point. And then we will see where that goes. And finally, we will come to what the future might hold, particularly both for business and for government. So that's the way I'd quite like to play it. The only request I have is if you make a comment from the floor, you keep it really short. And I'm looking for that question, right? We don't want long speeches because we want this interaction here. So let me start with the first general question to all the panel. The EU has this new requirements for sustainability and due diligence, and this is a big shift also in trade. And we said there is an opportunity here. The question I want to ask all the panelists from this direction, we'll start with Daya, is are these rules a risk that Sri Lanka should manage, or is it an opportunity? What do you think, Daya? Can we turn this into competitive advantage?
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I must thank Verité Research for inviting this wonderful event. First, what I want to emphasize is this green shift standard and the sustainability standards did not come overnight. There was a process. First seed was planted by the Brundtland Report, 1987, that led to the establishment of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. So the legitimacy for the European Union to adopt sustainability standards come from mainly three sources. First is the UNFCCC framework, Paris Agreement. Second, as Excellency mentioned, from the WTO. WTO does not have climate-related action agreement, but it has certain provisions that permit to take environmental standards, and there are many examples. I don't want to go into detail. Finally, EU being a regional trade agreement, the importance of a regional agreement was emphasized, has its own independent authority to impose its own standard, but subject to the international rule. That is the context I want to say.
Thank you.
To answer your question.
So, Daya, there's more than 2 minutes now. You have to quickly give me your point.
Okay, quickly, one point is what I can agree, we need to be ahead of the curve, not behind the curve. So we must act now, not later, already mentioned.
Thank you very, very much. Renuka, opportunity or threat?
I would think it's an opportunity because given our regional competitors and maybe the scale of Sri Lanka and what we can offer in terms of advantages, this would be a focal area that we can promote to attract investors to come to Sri Lanka on the platform that we are a sustainable destination, that we are compliant with the market requirements of the EU, which is a huge market for the investors under the BOI, with zero duty access to a lot of products. So I believe this would be a good move, but we need to have enough time to be compliant with their requirements. So if we start from now and we create awareness not only with the big corporates, but also down the line, the SMEs and the others who could be intermediate suppliers to the bigger companies, this I see as a very positive sign.
Thank you very much. Let me now bring in the private sector to this. You've had the state perspective. Let me start with Felix. Felix, please, opportunity or threat?
End of the day, it's going to be an opportunity, but to start with, it faces a lot of risk. If you aren't prepared for this, we are, although some of the main frame companies are there, still it's a new beginning. So awareness is very much important, as well as the risk is that if we don't comply, if we don't sustain what the EU is required us to do, that will be paced out. See, I think by 2030, if I'm not mistaken, that this will be a very important requirement by the EU if we are to export from Sri Lanka, if they are to import from Sri Lanka. So I think being also a European company, we have had the first taste here, because few years back we have been getting ready for this transformation, and Nipuna is here from MAS as well. So that the big players, maybe to somewhat they are being ready, but unfortunately we need to look at what is the status of the SME sector, the small exporters. So there is no definitive plan or program from the export sector or from the government or whoever the bureaucrats to educate them what are the necessities, what are the requirements that are going to happen or face to make sure that our exports will continue to EU.
Thank you very much. Nipuna, opportunity or threat?
No, I think just to echo, we definitely view this as an opportunity. I think Sri Lanka as a company already has quite a high level of compliance, especially in the apparel sector from what I can speak to. So for us, we view it as a competitive advantage, and for us, it's more like we're getting ready for some time, so we hope it'll happen sooner rather than later.
Great. Now let me turn to last but not least. We have Chandana. Chandana, rubber sector.
Yes.
Opportunity or threat?
I believe it's a certain opportunity, but the risk comes in the way how we are going to handle it. Now recently we, as the rubber sector, we had this EUDR, European Deforestation Regulation. It has been there for some time, and we had a deadline. Now we have said that it could be it is going to be postponed, but still official release has not been done. So looking at how the companies and how the government worked in getting through this EUDR, I think there we can see the risk, because how prepared we are, how we got ready to getting compliant with EUDR and all that. So I would say it is a definite opportunity, but it all depends on how we are going to strategize ourselves and grab the opportunity in a way that we could be creating some competitive advantage.
Thank you very much. So let's move for a second round of questions to deepen the kinds of things that you all gave us in the first round. Daya, now you get another chance at this, and I'll give you 3 minutes. So Daya, what should really we be doing in Sri Lanka to help this regulatory shift? I mean, as a negotiator, as a policymaker, what is your view?
Okay, Ganesh, thank you very much. What we have been doing is, our exports to EU market has been stagnated at 3 billion mark. This is with the GSP plus. This is what we have been doing. This is the real. Last year, our exports dropped to 2.7 billion. This is the true picture. This is what we have been doing. Okay, then to understand, to accelerate the exports, 2 things I emphasize. One is the policy coherence. Sri Lanka needs a clear strategy. Government must ensure policy coherence among their institutions. We have trade ministry, we have environment ministry, and then we have industry ministry. Do we have a policy coherence? And second, create, I think I heard from the previous speakers, we must create the enabling environment. Do we have that? I don't think so. This good example is, we are a cricket playing nation. Asia Cup is played where? In the UAE. Why Sri Lanka cannot attract that Asia Cup playing in Sri Lanka? We don't have an enabling environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daya. Very useful. So 2 points we get, this policy coherence and the enabling environment. Renuka, what are investors telling you about Sri Lanka's compliance? Are we good? Are we bad? Are we ugly? Second question I want to ask you is, what have we done so far to kind of differentiate this as part of our investment climate, if you have any thoughts on this?
So yes, the investors are also, I think globally, all investors are going towards sustainable operations, and it is also critical that we support them in this. So in furtherance of the support that is required by our investors, we have engaged with the EU Green Recovery Facility, and together with them, we are looking at establishing as a pilot project 3 of our zones, one in Katunayaka, Koggala, and in Horana as eco-industrial parks. So these are the 3 BOI zones, but on top of this, there will be other zones that are currently run by the Industries Ministry, who will also be part of this program. So as we speak, the feasibility reports are started on converting the industrial zones into eco-industrial zones. And BOI prior to this has also taken steps to see how we could position ourselves, our industrial export processing zones, as green zones. So we are very much focused on assisting our investors to be aware of sustainable methods, how they could even turn to solar rooftop as an alternative source of energy, how they could utilize the waste. We have collection centers in all our zones where the waste from the industry is collected, and this is passed on to the SMEs, where they could make it a source for another product that they are going to be engaged in. So we have been actually doing a lot in this sphere, and also looking at the circular economy, how even the wastewater that is generated through activities could be treated and reused and given at a very nominal fee, where we see construction industry coming and taking gallons of water from the water that is the wastewater that has been treated. So there are little things that we have already started on, and we are very committed to position Sri Lanka as a sustainable industrial area. And I think in furtherance of that, we would also need to now work with the policymakers to see how we could position the carbon credit facilities, and that would be an added attraction for investors.
Thank you very much. Felix, you've written on this shift, particularly in the context of the garment industry. What would you take for lessons from what you've done in your own firm, but what you see in Omega Lines for the rest of the sector?
Yes, we need to look at what the EU customer really wants. Are they the same as the US customer? No. So we have been seeking, the European customers are strongly focusing on quality of the product. Plus, of course, certain regulations, certain standards they require. My belief is that it's mixed. Certain countries or certain companies, they are compelled to adhere to these environment standards because of the Paris Pact and the other regulations that the EU has imposed. But slowly, it's getting. I mean, compared to US, where it is, we can see more and more, especially the younger generation, they consider it's a must, that they don't want to damage the environment. Initially, we have not seen in EU this requirement, but now it's becoming mandatory. So the situation is different. So one factor was the price. They need to pay a higher price when adhering to all these requirements. So, however, we were fortunate, but going forward, we need to make sure that need to do, especially the fabric sourcing, and especially the traceability is going to play a major role. Whether where we have sourced the fabric, are they coming without harming the earth or the labor. How about the pollution? So this traceability as well as these computations is not happening properly. So that's where I think we would like government and the policymakers to map EU-covered supply chains, whether it's rubber or whether it's tea or agricultural products, apparel, and publish, you don't establish, only publish clear guidance for the exporters. And then also, secondly, invest in public-private traceability platforms, georeferencing systems, and the single window certification process to lower compliance costs for smallholders and SMEs. Also negotiate technical assistance with donors, EU, to fund farmer training, digitalization, and third-party verification capacity. If you give me one more minute, I would,
please.
Yeah, let me go. Also for the business and exporters, maybe it's good to start mapping Tier 1 and Tier B suppliers now. Collect origin, geo-coordinates, and basic labor rights documentation. Pilot with one product and learn first. And collaborate in sectoral hubs like rubber, tea export, apparel, to share cost for audits, traceability, platforms, and training. And these are some thoughts only. And if we can continue with this one, by the time that all these regulations become mandatory, I'm sure that Sri Lanka would be at a very privileged or preferable country for our exports. Rather than becoming a risk, I think we will be able to get much more opportunities, because by that time, I don't think some of the countries will be able to cross this line by that time. Because since 1990s, mid-1990s, as the presenter focused, that no one was talking about this labor, Sri Lanka, the JAF, Joint Apparel Association Forum, we came up with this garment without guilt. I think that played a huge role to help develop our industry.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me ask Nipuna now. Nipuna, MAS is often taken as a benchmark for what happens in this sector, right? Can you tell us what you did in your firm to try to comply in broad terms, not state secrets, okay?
Yeah.
But broad terms, yeah? What did you do and what does it take?
So I think, starting from 2008, when Marks and Spencer, a UK, high street retailer, one of our biggest customers, launched Plan A, we built a factory in Tulliria Park. A few of you may have gone and seen it. It was the world's first green plant. Following that, our other competitors have also done their own green plants, and it's all world class. So beginning from there, our sustainability journey was world class. If I may say so, even myself, my background, I was in the business, and we started a new circularity and product sustainability sort of pillar.
So just on that, what's in a green plant? Can you explain?
So in a green plant, 2008, we had net metering. It was Sri Lanka's largest solar rooftop facility. Wastewater management. The bricks were made from waste. There's literally a lake underneath the plant to cool the plant. Mr. Taka from ADB was there a few weeks ago. So it's a world-class plant, and if anyone wants to see, please do let me know. So in 2023, we actually invested in a European company called 𝐕𝐢𝐬𝐢𝐭, which makes climate-positive yarn. This company is based out of Austria, because Austria is, the hub for cellulose-based natural yarn. Then last year, we did another agreement with an American company that makes textile-to-textile recycled polyester. So for example, you may know right now polyester is made from plastic bottles. This is going beyond to used textile gets collected, chemically recycled back into high-quality textile. So these are some of the proactive steps we've taken because what I said earlier, when the EU rules do kick in, we also do see a demand and supply scenario sort of emerging because there's a lot of new technology that needs to be unlocked. You need automated sorting. For example, in Sri Lanka, we don't have such high-skilled automated sorting where the camera recognizes what the material is. For example, Norway and Scandinavia has really, I actually visited a facility, all the waste comes in and robotic arms separate it and then they collect the textiles and repurpose it back into textiles. Our waste collection system here is still quite informal. We have one waste-to-energy plant within our own facility, and we try to supply that as much as possible, but our goal is also textile-to-textile recycling. So,
Thank you very much. Now, I want to turn to a different sector, to Chadima. Now, the rubber industry is many things, right? But you do have a lot of smallholders. What is it that industry is doing to help smallholders come to this position of adapting to these standards, and what is the state doing? Is there anything candid you can tell us?
Yes, no, I think it's best that I answer in comparison or talking about the UDR regulation that we have. So it came, it simply speaks and it says that European Union will not accept products made from deforested lands. So originating from deforested lands. So they have come out saying that they have identified 5 important, I would say, commodities, where rubber is one of them, which is one of the most important export products in the Sri Lankan export basket. And we do export a lot to Europe when we consider where we export. So the regulation was due to be in force beginning of 2025, but the EU decided to postpone it by 1 year. Now then again it was due to be enforced by next year January, and we have news that it will be once again postponed. And this time they have said their systems are not ready, therefore they are going to postpone it. And I really appreciate if you are not ready, it's better that you don't do it now. For example, just today we are abolishing our SVAT. So all the exporters are saying not to do it, but then nothing is ready, we know for fact. But government has gone through it, and I think we should have a discussion for that as well, if we could. Anyway, so coming back to your question, so this UDR system has a lot of risk analysis, chain, we have to audit the supply chain and a lot of things to be done. The process is very lengthy and very complex, I would say, a bit hard to understand sometimes. So what happened ultimately was the rubber price. Rubber came that there are UDR compliant rubber and UDR non-compliant rubber. So UDR compliant rubber was about 15 to 25%. The price was higher than the normal rubber. So which means that the products made from this rubber will be much expensive, and the European Union citizens will have to pay additional price for the products. So we have been informing the government, look into this, because we need help, because there is a lot of things to be done. You have to be on the field, get the geolocations and all that. But unfortunately, still, we as a country, the government does not have a solid system. We are still talking about what to do for about, I would say about 5-6 years now. We are still discussing, as you correctly said, we are having problems. And recently we had our annual exhibition last month, and we invited the Indian Rubber Institute, and they came and they presented a program of how they have done it in India, and it was very attractive. They have developed their own app and all that. They have done, I would say, a solid, they have come out with a solid system. So the discussion went like this, and one gentleman in the audience in the Q&A session asked, okay, so how much of your cultivation is now ready with the UDR? They said only 17%. So that is the problem. So the problem is this UDR is a good thing. You have to stop deforestation, no question in that. But the thing is, you go anywhere in the world, rubber, I'm sorry to use this word, but it's a sort of a primary industry, you know. The lady goes in the morning and tap the rubber and put it on her head and bring the latex and you make the rubber out of that. So all the automation, all these, you know, these beautiful factories start after that hard labor work. So it's very hard for this very complex and very advanced regulation to be put into the field. So this is where the problem is, I would say. So that's where we need the support of the government. And in Sri Lanka, I must tell that the leading manufacturers in rubber sector, they ran their own programs so that their supply chains would be compliant with the UDR. But those resources, that sort of a capital investment, effort, you know, the knowledge, know-how, all that is not present with the small and medium enterprises. This is the problem. So this is where the government should come in. So as the ambassador said, there are on certain issues, maybe of all these compliance matters, there is a big role that the government should play. But unfortunately, although we are always trying to open the eyes, still, at least in our sector, it has not been a positive sign, I may say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Because everybody's been brilliant with timekeeping, we have about another 20-25 minutes for this wonderful session.
You are very strict on that.
Well, I have to, otherwise Subhashini will never invite me again. So now we can open this up for questions from the floor. There are several in the chat. If anybody wants to ask a question, can you just raise your hand and say the question? Otherwise, put it in the chat. While you're thinking of the questions, let me just mention a few for the panel to answer, and I'll just go that way maybe, you know, just to make it different. Things that are different. There's a question about tax incentives. Should government be giving tax incentives to allow sectors to adjust? Renuka, maybe you can deal with that question. Then there is another question about sort of MAS and Brandix. A lot of your production is outside Sri Lanka. Are you doing your greening away from Sri Lanka because we don't have the right environment? There's a question about IP law. And Sri Lankan IP law is not very good for compliance. Daya, maybe you can deal with that one. There's a question perhaps you might want to talk about. Sri Lankan labor is not productive enough and lacks training. I'm just summarizing what I see. Maybe you can deal with that, and that, you know, we are unable to learn how to be compliant. I mean, maybe you can deal with that. Maybe that's a myth from somebody here. What kind of trade union participation can be there in this compliance shift, right? Is it a way to move into capital and technology and therefore reduce labor? I think that's the question about union. How do we bring the unions into this story, right? So maybe that question. SMEs can't get finance. Is that the problem? State has no capacity to do this stuff. Large firms should train. So there are lots of questions from this. I'm just taking what I've got. Is there anything from the floor? Anybody? Gosh, this is a wonderful audience. They love everything we're saying. Great. Why don't you start? Any of those questions I threw out? There's a question. Okay. Name, number, serial number. No. Name, name and question.
Well, thank you. I'm John from finance sector, actually. My question is, actually, we have been listening to problem statements that our readiness is not there. But then, if I may ask, whether do we have a roadmap, how we can transit towards this compliance to competitiveness? So what are the bottlenecks? And then how are we laying the building blocks? Where to start, the spark? Because there are some competencies already built up.
Great.
Can we look at certain integrations? So how we can begin this journey?
Great.
Otherwise,
Thank you.
we'll be...
Thank you. Very, very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Shoot. Anything you want to answer from that
I mean,
stuff?
I fully agree. I really feel the larger companies have done that roadmap, and maybe it's the smaller companies that need a bit of assistance to do it, for sure.
What about the labor question? Sri Lankan labor can't do this? They're not capable?
No,
Unions are a problem?
To be very frank with you, I think it's Sri Lankan labor in sustainability that has the skill to do it. And in the apparel sector, at least when Bangladesh, India, everyone needs to do it, it probably might be Sri Lankans going to assist, because we've been doing sustainability way before most of our peers in South Asia.
Thank you. Renuka, any of these questions?
Yes, so in terms of integration, yes, it's very important, and I think we need to have a very close dialogue with EU also to understand timelines, roadmaps, and how we can integrate everyone into this process so that it doesn't come as a surprise for a few of the companies and whereas others are ready. So it's a very close dialogue we need to initiate with the agencies that are involved in government along with the industry sectors. Talking about tax concessions, yes, that is something as BOI we had been giving, and investors keep asking us because compared to our competitors in the region, everyone is giving the tax breaks versus Sri Lanka. But this as a tool, I mean, the compliance as a tool would be something that I think we could leverage on to attract investors. As I mentioned earlier, if we can have we have to also be able to encourage them to take on the sustainability measures, go in for SDG related activities. So to do that, we should lay down the framework where they would be able to get carbon credits. We should have the framework for an agency to be able to register the carbon credits and where they could monetize it. Because that itself is an incentive, monetizing it, or because currently whoever does get carbon credits, I know they sell it to other countries and the credit goes to the other country, not to Sri Lanka. So as a country, we will also be very much advantaged if we can set up this framework, and as a company that is creating that carbon credit, they would also be incentivized to go more towards sustainable measures because of that.
Wonderful, thank you. Nipuna?
Felix.
Sorry, Felix.
Yeah, I think I'll first answer about this labor question. I think, as you, Ganesh, you correctly pointed out, it's a completely a myth. Sri Lankan labor, it being unproductive, it's no. It's how you manage them. And ours is a classic example because until 25 years back, Onivers, Italy, company, they didn't have any manufacturing arm, especially for the bra and brief. They had for the only machine incentive that hosiery and socks production, which they carried out in Europe. But by now, say over a period of 26 years, they have grown from 300 retail outlets to 5,700 outlets. And just imagine 80% of that products are manufactured in Sri Lanka. So which means I think even the efficiency, productivity, everything, we've been able to make a sort of a leading, whether it's process or managing humans or whatever, huge remark in the industrial sector in Sri Lanka. Because if not for that, even the parent company acknowledged, if not for the Sri Lankan production, they would have come across a lot of supply chain issues. But due to Sri Lanka's this labor, of course the management helps as well. But anywhere, I mean, you need to treat them properly. You need to treat them as human beings. That's it, very simple. You don't need to apply very difficult management philosophies or whatever. Treat them as human beings. And they will produce the results, because I think we are one of the companies, who started first the stand-up modular system. And a lot of people said that, how can a worker stand for 8 hours or 9 hours straight and, do the sewing. But unfortunately, we have proved the critics wrong, and that, of course, we had to we had to invest in certain machinery which helps girls to do this thing. And also we need to plan that, they will be not stagnant in one workplace, but doing multiple work, multiple duties and moving. And some people, MS calls it dancing modulars. So I think with that, we are able to, of course, at the same time, companies, they need to share their fair share, I mean the money, with also with the labor. That's very important. And on the tax thing, if I had to say, like Renuka said, because I think you mentioned about the SWAT thing. I think last Friday I discussed this at the Italian General Sri Lankan Business Council AGM. I think we have done all our attempts, and I think unfortunately we have given that up. SWAT, it's someone who has fed the wrong information to the IMF, and as a result that exporters are paying for that. I hope that they'll at least come across with this digitalization or invoicing project sooner to avoid that, because all these things matters for the exporters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nandana, anything you want to answer from those points?
Yes, so I believe the one question was about the SME and the other one was again about the government and all that. So again, coming back to the EUDR, few years back, the industry went into the government and tried to explain what is going to happen when you say it's a compliance matter. Now, how this happens is, if, let's say, for example, we make a tire in Sri Lanka and we send to Germany or somewhere in the European Union, and if that, in a particular store somewhere, you get a tire that is not compliant with the regulation, the company in Europe, they will be charged 4% of their annual turnover. So that is a big amount. So which means nobody wanted to buy anything if it's not compliant with EUDR. So that was the case. And then so we went to the government and we said, so this is coming up, so you have to act. But they didn't understand the gravity. I don't think they understand the gravity yet. Still they don't. And then I'll just tell you an example from what happened to me. So people were asking me, so can you supply? Yes, I said, okay, I can supply. Because we had no way to supply it from Sri Lanka, so we found an agent to supply rubber from Vietnam, which is EUDR compliant. So it was going to be in effect from 1st of January 2025, so we started ordering in July 2024. And this person the company who promised that they will supply me EUDR compliant rubber, when I placed the first order, they said, sorry, we are not able to. So that's what happened, right? So which means, even today, we are Sri Lankan rubber industry, the rubber plantations, the larger companies, yes, they are compliant. And most of their better rubber is imported as raw rubber, which we get for the other products, yes, from the larger plantations, yes. But most of our plantations are, I would say, domestic plantations, so these are not EUDR compliant. So that problem is there on one side. And when it comes to the financing side, there is no method to finance these compliant requirements. So the bottom line is, unless we are able to produce these tires or the products with the compliant, with the required compliance, we will not be able to do it. And I'll tell you one more thing, and how the because you are interested in looking at how the gravity of the government, how they take this. So there was one very high level meeting, and we're talking about this, and one gentleman stood up, a very senior person, and said, look, we will write to the EU and say, our country so and so, we are recovering from so and so and so, and we will ask for a concession. And we said, no, it's not going to happen, because people should understand, first of all these compliance matters are not just, we should not do it just to get the market, to be in the market. It is something that we should do. So first of all, it should be in our blood, it should be in our head. If we spoil the only planet that we have, there is no point of having markets or anything. You should understand that. If you destroy the forest and all that, there is no point. If anybody is doing a business, harassing the people, not paying their workers properly, what is the point of earning profit in that way? So this is what you should understand. This is what the important part, that unless this is in the minds of the people, these compliance things will not work, because people will find ways, to go around. So what I would say, one important thing, if you really want to save the planet, have a good society, we should also have to try to find a way to get this into people's mind. That is the important part. I don't think, unless you do it, we will not have a 100% sustainability.
Thank you. Daya, please. Any of those questions or anything else you want to say?
Just to answer this intellectual property, whether Sri Lankan intellectual property law is, I think, 2003 Intellectual Property Act. Our law is WTO TRIP compliant. But at the time, it was not prepared green standard in mind. So there is a gap. So this something I think policymakers need to think about. Still, our intellectual property law provide marks and eco-labeling. Right? So that provide ample opportunity to register eco-labeling. And most importantly, Her Excellency Ambassador is there, EU has a fortress when it comes to the geographical indication. This is my experience in WTO. Yet, Sri Lanka has been able to get the cinnamon, Ceylon tea. So this is a good GI registration for the cinnamon. This is a great achievement by the government. I remember when I was attached to the EU Sri Lanka trade project, we worked hard to get the GI. Now, these kind of certification can be used as a compliant of and get a niche market. That's.
Thank you. I've got a mic. So we've come sadly to the end of this thing, but we have one more question here, but just one thought I have. If the panel could think, so if you had a magic wand and there was one thing the state should do, think about that and please bring that out here. So while you're thinking about that one thing, right, so then we will have 5 things from this panel. Let's take your question, but just a brief question, and if there's any other question, sure.
Sorry, it's not a question, it's a...
No comments, please, no comments.
No.
No speeches, no comments.
No, please,
No speeches, no comments, sorry.
Okay, no.
Sorry, question?
Okay.
Question? Question or no question?
No question, but does any of these panel members know that the Minister of Plantation Industries has been working with the Minister of Trade and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the EU to get this sorted out, and then certain certificates are issued, and also do
so that's a very specific point, ne? So
no. Does anyone know that also that the Minister of Plantation Industries is working with the survey department?
So are you with the Plantation Ministry?
I am not, but I know this. Geolocations of the smallholders.
Okay, so thank you. Next one, yeah. Colonel Hera.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Colonel Nalin Hera. Sir, now, we know that India took from independence 60 years to get their first GDP $1 trillion. So after that, within very few years, they achieved their...
And your question?
Yeah. So now we are claiming for... we have been claiming for the best tree in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka export 30% of Sri Lanka claim 30% of the world's cinnamon market. But in the same time, the garment industry. But always I feel that we are trying to live in the comfort zone, and we are just depend on the traditional exports without innovation. So without innovations, how we can attach a country?
So we need to innovate in the green space. Wait, So first I want to, on this panel now, we're coming to the end, otherwise we won't get tea. So I want the 3 private sector people to give your wish list, one item. Okay, what is the one bullet? Why don't you start?
I think the main thing is power wheeling. It's happening, but power wheeling is a...
Sorry, power?
Power wheeling, where we can get access to more renewable energy because our rooftops are full.
Great, we need more energy. Power wheeling, please.
Complete stop to the corruption. Finish.
Excellent. Next.
Support to the SME sector.
But what kind of support? Specific.
Doing business.
Reduce red tape.
Yes.
Okay. Daya?
Ganesh, I need to tell.
Daya, you can give two things.
Two things.
Okay, two
I
things.
must tell this. First, very important development happening, 450 million people market, consumer market.
You mean
with
the EU?
19. Now, 19 trillion GDP. There is a compulsory mandatory standards are coming up. Government has the responsibility to work with the private sector, create a greater awareness. If you go to Ampara or Agunkola Palace, where traceability is mentioned, those suppliers, they don't know about these things, this greater awareness. Second thing is capacity building. This is where, madam, you can come forward. ITC, I worked with when the trade facilitation agreement came into existence, how much we contribute to the greater awareness. Now, government is trying to put in place the national single window. So therefore, capacity building is, I want to share this thing. There are a lot of mixed reactions. CBAM as a hidden protectionist ideas, some argue. Now, to address these issues, I think there is a international responsibility. Developed partners has a responsibility to give a capacity building support to the government as well as the private sector.
Thank you, Daya. Thank you. Renuka, I know your government, but what's your wish list?
An empowered central facilitation point for investors.
Great. Great. So there you have it. We talked a lot about compliance. In this new environment, some people think of this as a new form of protectionism. Other people think of it as a big opportunity, right? And the panel, I think, broadly thought of it as an opportunity, right? So in this very complex world of geoeconomics, where trade is being weaponized, we have to look for the niches, and that's particularly important in a country like Sri Lanka, right? And standards and green goods and green industry, green services, which we didn't really talk about, I think is really the way to go, right? So that's one central theme that I think we got from this panel. I think everybody here agrees. The second point, I think, was really on strategy. And one say, I was terribly impressed what I heard from business, and I was fascinated with your concept of green plants, and also fascinated by your acquisition policy to implement this strategy where you get others who have the tech, right? And you talked about the US and the Austrian examples. And so there is an investment involved, right, in coming to this. And investment can be millions of dollars, I guess, in your case, right? And a big firm like MAS can bear this cost because you have the deep pockets and the capital market access and so on, right? And in your case, also you talked about how this was being done, and I thought that was very interesting in the sector. From you, I got the sense that there were some producers that were doing well, but there was also a long tail of underperformance, right? The classic SME problem, right? And I think from what I picked up from Daya was related to that is, outside the urban areas and the industrial zones and so on, there's a large gap of knowledge, right? And a gap of services and support and things of this type, right? So we're kind of somewhat advantageous, but at the same time there is this problem, right? So we have to think of this as the next story. The last point I want to bring out is on strategy, and the wish list I thought was fascinating. Power and green power, you wanted. You wanted anti-corruption. So that's about the red tape. And in that part, government is doing a lot on digitization, and credit to government. The only question there to me is, you can digitize all the current procedures, but it won't improve efficiency by 100%, which is what we want, right? You have to cut the steps and get rid of, redundant laws. Daya mentioned IP legislation 2003 or something. I mean, I don't bring that as an example, but a lot of our laws go back even 30 years below that. Daya, when you were back in school, that stuff was there, right? So we haven't reformed this stuff, yeah? And we've got to take a stroke of the pen reform, and I wish our leader, the opposition, were here. I would have said that, sir, if you ever come to power, please do stroke of the pen reforms. Just sit at your table and just cut. And I think we have to do that. We have too much stuff that's not relevant, right? Too many steps. then you can digitize, right? So then you make the thing more efficient. And I'm sure you'll tell all the problems that investors face. All the complaints come to you. I know that because we've talked a lot about that. Yeah? So that corruption issue is really also an inefficiency issue, right? And then therefore there are incentives to rent seek as a result. Yes, it's a cycle. It's not just corruption per se in that narrow sense. And then we talked a bit about the SME support. And I think that's terribly important. Some of that has to be government and finance and training and donor support, but some of it also has to be industry-led, right? So somehow we have to consider industry associations playing a bigger role in this, right? And then somehow that has to be part of this, and the supply chain and the learning, and we have to do a lot more nurturing. I don't get the sense we do much of that in Sri Lanka. We are very weak with our supplier base as a result of this. I think I'm correct. And then you, of course, had the wish list of a facilitation center which is empowered, which I think is brilliant. And then my wish list would also add Daya's original point about the transparency and predictability of policy going forward, right, which I think is necessary. And I think government should have a statement as to what they collectively want to achieve, rather than lots of small measures. And we hope the budget will provide some clarity, but beyond the budget, we need also a growth plan. And I think that's very necessary as we transit away from the IMF program, which is very much a support for us, yeah? And that's coming very soon. We're midway now, to our own policy management, and we need all the things you talked about, Daya, but we also need a growth plan, right? And in that growth plan, climate change and tech and finance and all that has to be part of the plan, right? And better facilitation, trade agreements, that all has to be part of that plan, right? Agreed? So that's what we want more generally. So I think we've had a great session, and it's all about strategy, partnerships, if we want this green transition to go forward. So I think we want to thank this panel for a fantastic session, and I think we're just in time, given we started late. Sorry? Well, why don't you do that in the tea break? Yeah? Otherwise you won't get tea, because I'm told the tea is boiled. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dai, as always.
As we bring this evening's proceedings to a close, let me extend my heartfelt gratitude to all our speakers,
panelists, and to our audience. On behalf of Verité Research and the delegation of the European Union to Sri Lanka and Maldives, thank you once again for joining with us. We now invite all of you to join us and continue the conversations over refreshments and networking. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you.